My phone buzzed on the white tablecloth. I already had my wine glass in my hand, a Chenin Blanc, cold and slightly floral, the kind of glass you actually enjoy when the evening is going well. The evening was not going well. I looked down at the screen. A text from my husband, Owen. Running late, babe. Stuck in a review meeting. Probably another 2 hours. Don't wait up. Love you. I read it once. I set the glass down. And then I looked up, across 30, feet of warm candlelight and soft restaurant, noise, at my husband Owen, who was not in a review meeting, who was not running late, who was sitting at a corner table near the window in the same jacket he'd worn to work that morning, his hand resting over the hand of a woman I recognized from a company holiday party 3 years ago. He hadn't seen me yet. He was too busy tucking a strand of her hair behind her ear. I picked up my phone. I opened the camera. I steadied my hand, and I want you to note that my hand was completely steady, and I took the photograph. Then I opened his text. The one that said, running late, babe. Love you. And I replied to it with the photo. No words, no caption, just the image. Then I set my phone face down on the white tablecloth, picked up my Chenin Blanc, and looked across the table at my colleague Dana and said, tell me about the Germantown project. I want to hear everything. I did not look at Owen again until his phone lit up. I watched it happen from my peripheral vision, the way he glanced at the screen, with the bored half attention of someone expecting a work notification. The way he picked it up, the way the bored half attention became something else entirely, the way his whole body went very, very still. And then he looked up and scanned the room. His eyes found mine. I held his gaze for 4 seconds. Then I looked back at Dana and said, sorry, the ceiling height issue. What did the client say? That was the night my marriage ended. But to understand why I was so calm, why my hand didn't shake, why I finished my dinner, why I already had a divorce attorney's number saved in my phone, you need to understand the 14 months that came before that Tuesday evening in September at a restaurant called the Cardinal in downtown Nashville, Tennessee. You need to understand who I was, who Owen was, what we built, and exactly when I realized that what we had built was standing on sand. So let me take you back to the beginning. I met Owen at a charity auction in the Green Hills neighborhood of Nashville in the summer of 2011. I was 29. He was 32. I was a senior associate at a commercial interior design firm called Stratton Collective, the kind of firm that got called in when a developer wanted a lobby that said arrival rather than just entrance. He was a regional sales director at a medical device company called Corex Technologies, which meant he traveled a great deal, talked to hospital procurement executives for a living, and had the particular social confidence of someone who had spent years walking into rooms full of skeptical strangers and walking out with their trust. He was standing near the bar in a charcoal blazer, holding a glass of bourbon he wasn't really drinking, looking out at the room with the calm, self-contained ease of a man who doesn't need the party to come to him. I've always been drawn to that quality, the people who don't need the room. He noticed me noticing him, instead of using that as a reason to be charming instead of crossing the space with some polished opener. He just gave me a small nod. Unhurried, the kind that says, I see you, no rush. And then he went back to his bourbon. I walked over. We talked until the auction ended and kept talking, on the street outside until nearly 2 a.m, when I finally noticed my feet and remembered I had a 7 a.m. site visit. He texted the next morning, how are the feet? 3.5 years later, I married him at Cheekwood Estate on the west side of Nashville, under a canopy of October oaks that had gone full amber and gold in the autumn light. My sister Bridget stood beside me. Owen cried during his vows, which I did not expect and which undid me completely in the best possible way. There were 60 guests and a bluegrass quartet and a cake from a bakery in East Nashville that Owen had driven across town 3 times to taste test, and it was, I want to say this clearly and without irony, one of the most beautiful evenings of my life. Owen was a good husband. I need you to hear that, because it matters to the story. He was attentive and funny and present in the early years of our marriage. He drove me to a 7 a.m. specialist appointment the morning my car wouldn't start. When my father had hip surgery in 2018, Owen took 3 days of vacation without being asked and drove us both to Memphis, and sat with my dad for hours talking about college football while I handled the hospital paperwork, and my father, who did not warm to people easily, told me afterward that Owen was the real thing. I believed that for a long time. I believed that for a long time. By 2022, we were living in a 4-bedroom, Craftsman in East Nashville's Lockland, Springs neighborhood, a tree-lined, walkable part of the city where people know the names of each other's dogs. I had left Stratton Collective and launched my own studio, Hartley and Carbard Design. Just me and 2 associates and a strong enough reputation that we didn't need to chase work. Owen had been promoted twice at Corex and was now director of national accounts, which meant more travel, more responsibility, and, as I would eventually understand, more cover. We had a cat named Clementine. We had a standing Sunday brunch spot. We had 9 years of shared history, a shared mortgage, a shared version of the future. We also, as it turned out, had very different ideas about what the present looked like. The first thing I noticed was the phone. Not dramatically, not a sudden change, more like a slow migration in the device, moving from countertops and nightstands to pockets, and bathroom trips and always face down on the nearest surface. Owen had never been a guarded person with his phone. For 9 years it had charged on the nightstand, sat open on the kitchen table, been handed to me for navigation without a second thought. The new habits arrived so gradually that I almost didn't register them as habits at all. I told myself it was work stress. Corex had been navigating a complicated acquisition, and Owen had mentioned the politics of it more than once. I told myself some people get protective about devices when they're managing sensitive professional situations. I told myself a lot of things that were easier than the alternative. The second thing was the travel. Owen had always traveled 10, sometimes 12 days a month. That was normal for his role. But in early 2023, the trip started stretching. A 2-day trip to Charlotte would become 3. A quick turnaround to Chicago would require staying through the weekend for a rescheduled Monday presentation. He was apologetic about it in that warm, self-aware way he had. He'd bring something home from wherever he'd been, a candle or a small local thing, and be extra attentive for the first day back. The gifts bothered me more than the absences in retrospect. Guilt gifts are a real phenomenon. At the time, I just thought he was considerate. The third thing was the restaurants. Owen loved restaurants. It had been one of the first things I loved about him. His genuine enthusiasm for new places, his curiosity about food and the people who made it. For years, he'd been the one texting me links to new openings, suggesting we try the chef who'd just come up from New Orleans or the wine bar that had just opened in the Gulch. But in 2023, he started steering us back to our regulars, the Greek place around the corner, the ramen spot on Woodland, the Italian place in the Gulch we'd been going to for 6 years. I understand why now. He had a separate geography, a constellation of places he went with her, and he was protecting it by keeping our social life contained to restaurants, where running into them was unlikely. I want you to appreciate the level of operational detail that required. This was not carelessness. This was a system. The name I eventually connected to all of it was Simone. Simone Aldridge, a marketing consultant, formerly a contractor with Corex, now running her own independent practice. I had met her once at a company holiday party in December 2021, striking in a quiet way, dark hair, watchful eyes, the kind of person who appears to be listening to everything even when she's not, visibly paying attention. I had thought nothing of her. I found her name the most mundane way imaginable. She sent a calendar invite to Owen's work email, and his work email was synced to the shared iPad we kept in the kitchen. And the notification appeared on the screen while I was looking up a recipe. Dinner, Simone, Thursday, 7 p.m. Not a meeting. Not a project name. Just her name and a time. Owen had told me he was flying to Louisville on Thursday. I stared at that notification for a long time. Then I looked up Simone Aldridge. Nashville-based. No current Corex affiliation. Independent practice recently founded. Not in Louisville. Right here. I closed the iPad and I went for a long walk through the neighborhood, and I thought very carefully about what I knew, what I needed to know, and what I was going to do with either. Here is where some people would confront. Go home, put the evidence on the table, demand an explanation. I understand the impulse. I felt it. But I have spent my professional life understanding that the order in which you do things matters enormously. You don't demo the walls before you understand the structure. You don't make your biggest move before you understand the full picture. So I didn't say a word to Owen. I called my sister Bridget instead. Bridget is 3 years older than me and lives in Charlotte, where she works in financial planning and has the kind of clear, organized, unsentimental intelligence that I have always been grateful for in a crisis. She didn't cry when I told her. She asked 3 questions. How long did I think it had been going on? Did we have a prenuptial agreement? Did I have access to our joint financial records? I loved her so much in that moment. No prenup. Yes to the financials. Timeline unknown, but I suspected longer than I wanted to think about. Don't say anything yet, Bridget said. Call a divorce attorney first, tomorrow. I called Patricia Okafor on Monday morning. Family law attorney, Midtown Nashville, mid-50s, close-cropped natural hair, reading glasses on a beaded chain, recommended by a former colleague, who'd described her as the kind of woman you want standing between you and the worst day of your life. Over the next 3 weeks, I gathered information. I went through our joint accounts. I handled our household finances, so I had both access and legitimacy. What I found was what I had begun to expect. Restaurant charges at places I'd never been, hotel reservations that didn't align with his stated travel, cash withdrawals in amounts large enough to suggest deliberate off-the-record spending. I printed everything and gave it to Patricia. I kept showing up to work. I ran Hartley & Co. We were in the middle of a major boutique hotel renovation in the Gulch, and my clients needed me present and focused. And I was both. I had dinner with Owen. I asked about his day. I watched television beside him on the couch. I played the role of wife with the same consistency. He had been playing the role of husband, and I did not enjoy doing it. But I understood it was necessary, and I am a person who can do necessary things. And then, on a Tuesday evening in late September, my colleague, Dana, texted to say a reservation had opened at a restaurant called The Cardinal. I said yes. I did not know what I was walking into. Part 4, The Cardinal. The Cardinal had opened 8 months earlier in a converted warehouse space in the Gulch. Neighborhood, acclaimed chef, stripped-back seasonal menu. The kind of place that generates 3-month waiting lists within a week of opening. Dana had been trying to get a reservation since February. Owen had told me that morning he'd be working late. Performance reviews, he said, needed to stay and finish evaluations with his HR partner. I met Dana at the Cardinal at 7. It was beautiful inside. Original brick walls, low amber lighting, an open kitchen running the full length of the back wall. Dana was already there when I arrived, studying the menu with the intensity of someone who had been waiting for this for 8 months. We ordered a bottle of wine. We settled in. We started talking. I was mid-sentence when I saw him. Owen, 30 feet away near the window. His jacket, the same jacket he'd worn to work that morning, and his profile turned slightly away. And across the table from him, a woman with dark hair and a composed, watchful expression. Simona. Dana saw my face change. She started to turn around. Don't, I said. She stopped. Look at your menu, I said. She looked at her menu. And I sat with my wine glass and I breathed and I watched. They were not being careful. There was a settled ease between them, the comfortable, unremarkable closeness of people who have been in each other's company many times. She was laughing at something he'd said. His hand rested over hers on the table. He looked at her the way I had not seen him look at anything in a long time. Then my phone buzzed. Running late, babe. Stuck in a review meeting. Probably another 2 hours. Don't wait up. Love you. And you already know what happened next. The photo, the reply, the 4 seconds of eye contact across the candlelit room. What I haven't told you is what happened inside me in those 4 seconds. It wasn't rage. It wasn't the collapse. I might have predicted if you'd asked me a year earlier how I would handle this exact moment. It was something closer to the feeling you get when you've been carrying a weight for a long time without admitting how heavy it was, and you finally set it down. I had been half-knowing for months. Half-knowing is its own particular kind of exhausting. It takes enormous energy to look at something and keep choosing not to see it fully. And in those 4 seconds, Owen's eyes finding mine across the restaurant, both of us understanding everything, the half-knowing ended. I knew, and knowing, even painful knowing, is always lighter than the alternative. I looked back at Dana and said, "Sorry, tell me about the ceiling height issue." What did the client say? Dana, who is one of the finest human beings I know, took a breath and started talking about the ceiling height issue. We finished our dinner. We split a brown butter tart with salted caramel that was genuinely one of the best desserts I have ever eaten. We paid the check and walked out into the cool Nashville night air. And on the sidewalk, Dana hugged me for a long time without saying anything. "Tomorrow," I told her. "I'll talk tomorrow." She nodded. She let me go. Owen was home when I got there. Every light in the house was on. He was normally a lamps and dimmers person, but anxiety made him want brightness. He was sitting on the edge of the couch with his elbows on his knees and his hands clasped, and he looked up when I came through the door with the expression of a man who has spent 2 hours discovering what it feels like when the thing he was most afraid of has already happened. I hung up my jacket. I set my keys on the hook by the door. "I think you should sleep in the guest room tonight," I said. "Viv, I'm not asking. Can we just—" "Not tonight, Owen." My voice was steady, completely steady. "I'm not going to have this conversation at 11 o'clock, when I've had wine and you've had whatever kind of evening you've had. When I'm ready to talk, I'll tell you." A long pause. He went to the guest room. I washed my face. I changed into pajamas. I lay in the dark with Clementine, curled against my legs. She had come to find me the moment I walked in, which felt like the most uncomplicated kindness I'd received all day. And I looked at the ceiling and I let myself feel it. All of it. The grief, the anger, the particular humiliation of having been lied to with such practiced ease for so long. I let it move through me. Then I closed my eyes. And I went to sleep, because tomorrow I had work to do. I did not have the big conversation with Owen for 3 weeks. I repainted my living room a deep, warm terracotta that I'd been thinking about for 3 years and that Owen had always called too much. It is not too much. It is exactly right. Bridget came down for my birthday in August and we went to the Germantown Farmers Market and sat on the porch with good coffee, and I felt, somewhere in my chest, the specific warmth of a life that is genuinely mine. There's a structural engineer named Emmett. I've had dinner with a few times now. He makes his own pasta, has strong opinions about light and proportion, and seems genuinely unbothered by a cat who sits on the table. We'll see where it goes. Clementine, who was always nominally Owen's cat, has been sleeping on my reading chair every night since he left. I consider this the clearest possible verdict. Epilogue. The photograph. You want to know why I took the photo? Not what it showed, that's obvious, but why that was the response. Why, in the most disorienting moment of my adult life, with my husband 30 feet away and his lie still warm on my phone screen, I picked up a camera. Here is the answer. Owen was a skilled narrator. He was smooth and practiced, and if I had walked across that restaurant floor, he would have managed the moment. He would have been contrite and careful, and I would have been visibly undone. And by the time we got home, the conversation would have been shaped by his hands, not mine. If I had simply left and confronted him at home, he would have had hours to prepare a version of events. But a photograph doesn't negotiate. A photograph doesn't accept your framing or your explanation, or your carefully constructed context. It says, here is what is. The light was warm, the restaurant was beautiful, your hand was on her hand, and I was 30 feet away with a steady hand and a full glass of wine the whole time. I sent it with no words because no words were needed. The image said everything, and I knew that the moment he looked up and found my eyes across that room, he would understand something important, that he had not been managing this situation. He had never been managing it. The 4 seconds of eye contact were for me more than for him. I needed to know that I could hold his gaze in that moment without flinching. That the woman he'd been lying to for over a year was sitting 30 feet away, composed, present, clear-eyed, and that whatever version of this moment he had imagined, whatever collapse he might have feared or expected, none of it was happening. My hand was steady. My glass was in my hand, and I had already sent the photo. There is a woman I know now that I didn't know before all of this. She is the woman who sat in a restaurant and held a camera steady while her life rearranged itself around her. The woman who called her lawyer before she called her husband. The woman who built her case in silence and delivered it with complete calm. Across a kitchen table on a Wednesday morning. She is me. She was always me. It just took a Tuesday evening in September, at a restaurant I'd been trying to get into for 8 months, to introduce us properly. My name is Vivian Hartley. I own a design studio in Nashville, Tennessee. I have a reading chair the color of autumn, and a cat who has chosen her person. I have a glass of wine and the whole rest of my life, and I am, completely and without reservation, exactly where I'm supposed to be.